The man who fronted one of Britain's most beloved television programs, a show literally built around second chances and the belief that broken things can be made whole again, is now awaiting trial on two separate sets of criminal charges, with a court date set for 2027. His name had become synonymous with warmth, craft, and the quiet dignity of working with your hands. Jay Blades was the repair shop, and then, almost without warning, he wasn't. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how the show that defined his life, and the life that built the show, arrived at a moment nobody who watched it could have predicted. The repair shop did not start as a primetime television event. When it launched on the BBC in 2017, it was a quiet daytime program about craftspeople fixing things. No drama, no competition, no elimination. A woman brought in her grandmother's music box. A man carried in a clock his father had left him. A team of specialists looked at the damage and got to work. That was the show, and by most television logic, it should have vanished after one series. It didn't. It grew. Slowly at first, the kind of growth that doesn't announce itself with a viral moment, but builds through word of mouth and rewatching and telling someone at work they need to catch up. The format was deceptively simple. Members of the public would arrive at a barn at the Weald and Downland Living Museum, a 40-acre open-air site just outside Chichester in West Sussex, and hand over something they loved to people who knew how to care for it. The emotional weight was always in the handover, that moment where someone passed something fragile and irreplaceable across a workbench and trusted a stranger with it. The BBC moved the show to a Wednesday night primetime slot. 6 million viewers followed it there. What started as background television had become an appointment. People talked about episodes at dinner. Parents watched it with their adult children. By the time it won a National Television Award in 2023, the repair shop had joined a small group of BBC programs, Antiques Roadshow, Who Do You Think You Are?, that had quietly become part of the national furniture. The face at the center of all of it was a furniture restorer from East London, who had left school at 15 with no qualifications and once slept in a car park because he had nowhere else to go. But here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. Jay Blades, born Jason Blades in February 1970, grew up on a council estate in Hackney, East London, raised by his mother alongside his younger brother. His mother worked as a receptionist. One income, 2 boys, a tight flat in one of the most economically pressured parts of the city. Jay described her as someone who made sure there was food on the table, whatever it took. What she couldn't provide, and what no school ever thought to check for, was a diagnosis for the dyslexia that meant Jay moved through his entire education without ever learning to properly read or write. He left school at 15. The first jobs were physical, a stint at a sausage factory, time on building sites. He taught himself furniture restoration not as a career plan, but because it was something his hands could do and his brain could hold. In a world where reading a contract or filling out a form was a source of private shame, working with wood and leather and metal offered something school never had, a task with a visible result and a clear measure of success. He eventually married his first wife, Jade, a textiles graduate, and together they set up a social enterprise, buying salvaged furniture, restoring it, and using the process to train young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. The charity was called Out of the Dark. The name was intentional. Jay had spent most of his youth in a version of darkness, academic failure, physical confrontations, racist taunts from teachers who had written him off long before he had the language to push back against it. The charity was his attempt to reach back in and pull someone else forward. For a while it worked. London furniture store Heels began selling the charity's restored pieces. The national press picked up the story. And then, in 2015, everything collapsed at once. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around him saw coming. Jay Blades has spoken about what happened in 2015 more than once, because it became part of the story he told publicly. A story about survival and the unlikely places you find your way back from. His first marriage broke down. The charity broke down at the same time. The two things that had structured his adult life and given him a reason to get out of bed, both gone within a short span of each other. He described what followed as a period of severe mental health struggle, not the kind of difficulty you push through on your own, the kind that removes your ability to plan or reason or see a point. He got in his car and drove. No destination, no plan. He ended up in Wolverhampton. He slept in the vehicle for 2 nights. His ex-wife reported him missing, and when police located him, a contact came to collect him, a man named Gerald Bailey, a Wolverhampton-based fashion designer who had once bought a piece of furniture from Jay. Gerald gave him a spare room, money for food and clothes, and the use of a warehouse. Jay started rebuilding. He set up a new furniture restoration business, J & Co., in Wolverhampton. He ran workshops. One of those workshops was attended by an assistant to television presenter Kirsty Allsop, which led to a small appearance on her Channel 4 Crafts program in 2014. That appearance was seen by producers at the BBC's Money for Nothing series. They brought him in as an artisan, then promoted him to presenter. From there, the path to the repair shop was short. The show's creative director, Katie Thorogood, at production company Ricochet, had conceived the format after having a chair restored that had belonged to her late mother. She needed a presenter who understood what it meant to care about an object, not as an investment but as a vessel for something that couldn't be priced. Jay Blades was exactly that. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. Here is the detail that most people who watched the repair shop for years never knew. Jay Blades could not read the production emails. Only one colleague on the show knew, metalwork and leatherwork expert Kirsten Ramsey, who quietly read them to him before filming. He had built a television career without ever once having to hold a script, because the repair shop had no scripted dialogue. It was conversation. Two people talking honestly in front of a camera. That format had suited him, almost as if it had been designed around the thing he couldn't do. In January 2022, he made that secret public. A BBC One documentary, Jay Blades, Learning to Read at 51, followed him through the process of formally addressing the dyslexia he had carried his whole life. At the time of filming, his reading age was assessed at around 11 years old. He was one of the most recognizable television faces in Britain. The documentary became part of the same redemption arc the show itself had always sold. The idea that it was never too late, that the gap between where you started and where you ended up was crossable if you kept moving. Jay received his MBE in 2021. He won a BAFTA the following year, alongside the rest of the team, for a special episode in which the then Prince of Wales visited the barn and brought two family pieces to be restored. King Charles, visibly relaxed in a way rarely seen on camera, laughed alongside Jay in the workshop for an hour. A friendship built on a shared interest in heritage and craft, as Jay described it. By the end of 2022, the show was in its 9th series. Jay married his second wife, fitness trainer Lisa Z. Boson, at a beachfront villa in Barbados in November of that year. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. The events of 2024 moved quickly, and they came in a sequence that, in retrospect, reads like a series of dominoes. In late April, Jay posted a video to his Instagram. He had just returned from his uncle's funeral. His uncle had been murdered a few weeks earlier. Jay, dressed in a dark suit, spoke directly to camera, visibly shaken, describing feeling messed up. He said he needed to take stock, get some therapy, step back. He told his followers he would be back soon. He signed off by asking them to take care of each other. Within days of that post, Lisa Z. Boson announced on her own Instagram that their marriage had ended after 18 months. The separation was public before any formal statement had been made. The next morning, West Mercia police confirmed they had been called to an address the day after her post. Filming on the new series of The Repair Shop had already started. It continued without Jay. In September 2024, West Mercia police charged him with one count of engaging in controlling and coercive behavior in a relationship between January 2023 and September 2024. He appeared at Kidderminster Magistrates Court. He was bailed to appear at Worcester Crown Court. The BBC, which had been carefully silent throughout the preceding months, began urgently removing episodes featuring him from the broadcast schedule. A repeat of his collaborative show David and Jay's Touring Toolshed was pulled from a Friday evening slot and replaced with an episode of Garden Rescue. He resigned as Chancellor of Buckinghamshire New University the same week. He also stepped down as an ambassador for the King's Foundation, the royal charity he had publicly supported and visited in person for the BAFTA-winning episode. He pleaded not guilty to the coercive control charge at Worcester Crown Court in October 2024. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me because this next part is why the whole story matters. In August 2025, West Mercia police confirmed a second and entirely separate set of charges. Jay Blades was charged with 2 counts of rape. He was 55 years old. He appeared at Telford Magistrates Court via video link, spoke only to confirm his name, address, and date of birth, and thanked the judge at the close of the short hearing. He was granted conditional bail and directed to appear at Shrewsbury Crown Court in September. At Shrewsbury Crown Court, he pleaded not guilty to both counts. The judge at the hearing noted he regretted the length of the delay before trial, citing a backlog of criminal cases across the court system. The rape trial was listed for September 2027. A case management hearing, at which Blades will be required to appear in person, was set for May 2026. He was instructed not to contact the complainant. The BBC issued a statement confirming that no new work with Blades was planned for the foreseeable future. Promotional activity connected to him had already been paused. According to reports, Channel 5 also quietly paused development projects that had been in discussion with him. The live tour connected to the show, The Repair Shop, Secrets from the Barn, saw several performance dates canceled as ticket sales dropped. Through all of it, past episodes of The Repair Shop featuring Jay continued to remain available on BBC iPlayer. The corporation's position, that content would not be retroactively removed from its catalog during ongoing legal proceedings, drew comment in the press, particularly given the BBC had acted more decisively in other cases. When news anchor Ho Edwards pleaded guilty to accessing child abuse images, he was removed from a Doctor Who episode in which he had a voice role. The position on Blades' content stayed as it was. He has denied all charges. He has maintained his innocence throughout proceedings. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. The Repair Shop did not end. Season 14 aired through the spring and summer of 2025, without Jay Blades in the presenter's chair. The craftspeople who had always been the technical heart of the show, Will Kirk, Dominic Shanae, the Fletcher siblings Steve and Susie, Kirsten Ramsey, Amanda Middleditch, Lucia Scalisi, and the rest of the Barn team, were still there. The barn was still there. The heirlooms still arrived. For the 2024 Christmas special, the BBC brought in Roman Kemp, co-presenter of The One Show, as a guest host for the festive episode. Kemp had been involved earlier that year when The One Show ran a public call-out for items to be featured on The Repair Shop. His presence in the Christmas special was a signal that the broadcaster was testing what the show could look like with a different front-of-house personality, rather than letting the format go dark. Season 15 launched in October 2025. The BBC confirmed continued production. The format, at its core, was never dependent on a single person in the way a panel show or a chat program might be. The show's emotional engine, people carrying in objects that meant something to them and leaving with them repaired, ran whether a famous face introduced the story or not. By the time Season 15 was airing, The Repair Shop had produced over 300 episodes across 16 series. The oldest object ever brought to the barn dated back to the 1600s, a lantern clock believed to have been made by the clockmaker Thomas Looms, a contemporary of Shakespeare. The show had hosted a sitting monarch. It had won a BAFTA. It had put a man on national television who couldn't read the script because there was no script, and turned that format into a primetime hit. All of that is still true. None of it has been undone by what came after. But the story of what came after is now permanently part of what the show is. At this point in the story, most people walked away. What happened next is the part nobody talks about. There is something specifically uncomfortable about this story that goes beyond the standard narrative of a television personality facing legal trouble. The Repair Shop was not just entertainment. Jay Blades was not just a presenter. The show had a philosophy, and he was its living embodiment, that the things which appear irreparably damaged often are not, that the value of something lies not in its market price, but in what it carries, that skill applied with patience and care can bring back what seemed lost. Jay had applied that philosophy to himself, openly and repeatedly, in interviews and in his memoir, Making It, and in the documentary about his literacy. The mental health crisis of 2015, the homelessness, the career that almost didn't happen. He described the Repair Shop not just as a job, but as a place that gave him something he hadn't previously been able to hold on to. He said, in more than one interview, that fixing things made the voices of the teachers who had written him off disappear a little further from his shoulders. That personal narrative, the repaired man presenting a repair show, was inseparable from the program's emotional appeal. It gave the show a depth that a different presenter might not have generated. It also means that the collapse of his public reputation lands differently than it would for someone whose identity had never been tied to that story. The charges against him are serious. He has denied all of them. The legal process will take years, but the contradiction between the story he told and the accusations he now faces is one the show cannot step around. The barn is still there, the craftspeople are still there, the heirlooms still arrive. And the man who stood at the center of it, who once drove his car to nowhere because he had run out of reasons to stay, is now waiting for a trial that will determine whether the story he told about himself was the whole story. One phone call, one conversation. That's all it took to change the direction of everything. The repair shop was built on a specific kind of hope. The idea that damage is not the same as destruction, and that what looks beyond saving sometimes only needs the right hands. Whether that hope survives the next chapter depends partly on what the courts decide, and partly on whether the people who made the show what it was can carry its identity forward without the man who, for 7 years, was the face of it. The craftspeople are still working. The barn is still open. And whatever verdict comes out of Shrewsbury Crown Court in 2027, the 300 episodes that remain on iPlayer are not going anywhere. The question the show has never had to answer before is the one it now can't avoid. When the person who told you everything could be repaired turns out to have a story far more complicated than the one they told. What do you do with the thing they built? Do you think the BBC was right to keep Jay Blade's episodes on iPlayer while legal proceedings are ongoing? Or should they have followed the same approach they took with other cases and pulled them? Let us know below.